Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Redesign Reports with Grouping and Summary Functions. My name is Anna and I'm a Product Marketing Manager here at Smartsheet. Our agenda today is going to be focused fully on reports, which has been a Smartsheet capability that has existed for a while, and we've recently released some new enhancements that are going to really allow you to use reports to understand the work that you're managing in Smartsheet at a higher level. For today's webinar, we're going to start with an introduction to reports, then add in those new capabilities that I mentioned with grouping and summaries. And then we're going to finish up today by talking about a different kind of report called the sheet summary report, and of course, how to collaborate. So with the reports that you've created, how to share, understanding permissions with reports, and how to update in reports and make sure your sheets are getting updated and the users that you're collaborating with can see the information that they need to see in the reports that you create. So starting at the very beginning, reports are a way for you to consolidate data from multiple sheets into a single place, and it's a customized view, meaning in addition to selecting one or more sheets to bring together data from, you can also define criteria for a custom view, so not viewing every single row from those sheets, and choose the columns that you'd like to display. Using these three settings in the report builder allows you to really create the view that you need of the work that you're managing in a sheet. So it's a great way to really focus. The newest capabilities that we've released are going to allow you to take this data, so the results of bringing together those sheets and adding in that criteria, and instead of just viewing it, you're now going to be able to group it by a common criteria as well as roll up data with functions. So this is our introduction. This is what we're getting started with, and we're going to now head into Smartsheet for a demo so you can see this in action. And just like with our slides where we split it up into first talking about setting up that structure and selecting what rows you see, we'll start with that and then we'll continue and layer in those additional grouping and summary capabilities. For today's demo, I'm going to start in the Solution Center because, as usual, I will be using one of the template sets that are available for you to download with a Smartsheet license if you'd like to use the sheets, reports, and dashboards that we're looking at today for your own Smartsheet work. So the one that we're using today is called Project Management Office, and you can locate this by selecting the plus button in the left panel of your Smartsheet, typing in Project Management Office, and clicking through to download folders with all of the assets that we're going to be looking at today. Now, PMOs, of course, it's going to be a collection of sheets, reports, and dashboards, and we're going to really start with a single focus where we have a folder that's been created called Project Level. And this is a folder that anytime that I want to kick off a new project, I can simply right-click and save as new to create a project that's going to include these sheets, reports, and a dashboard for that project. This in of itself is a best practice. So if you run multiple projects or any other types of programs or processes that you're going to be running over and over in Smartsheet, putting all those items in a folder and right-clicking and saving as new is a great way to really templatize your work. We're going to come back to that idea in a little bit once we start thinking about working across multiple sheets, but today we're just going to start with our project plan sheet in this template set. And this is a project plan that's been created to allow us to track all of the tasks for our project. And you'll see here we are tracking tasks, statuses with a drop-down column as well as symbols, and of course assignments, dates, and other important information. Now, a lot of the projects that you're managing are likely going to have a lot of collaborators, a lot of different information, and probably even more columns than we're looking at here. So I know sometimes you find yourself scrolling up and down, left to right, and this is where reports can become really helpful. To create a report, we're going to come right back to our original section where we started with our folder, and I'm going to right-click and select Report. Before I do that, you're going to notice we actually have 3 reports already, and I know that because the little blue report icon is available next to the name of each report. We're going to start by looking at our overdue report. And this is a report that's been created to look specifically at the project sheet that we just looked at, and it has any rows that are overdue. And we can define overdue as anything that should already be complete, looking at its end date, but isn't. So the percent complete is less than 100%, or we could look at our status column and say if the status column is not complete. Now that we know what our end result is, let's really start from the beginning and create this report from scratch. So again, we'll right-click here and select Report. You'll see there are 2 types of reports, and we're going to focus on Row Report for now, and we'll come back to Sheet Summary Report. And I'm going to title this one Overdue Tasks, just so we can differentiate it from the one that's already created. So with reports, the first thing that you're going to do is tell Smartsheet what sheets do I want to include in my report. So at the most basic level, reports are a way to view data from your underlying sheet. So I'll go ahead and select the sheet that we were originally looking at and then click Next. And we'll talk about including multiple sheets in your report in just a moment. Next, I can select which columns from my sheet to display, and this is a really great way to focus. So if you only need to work in a couple columns, you can create a report to really view the information you need and not get distracted with all the other columns that are there because other people need to be updating them. Here, I'll go ahead and include my assigned to and my percent complete, end date, as well as start date columns and a status column. I can also then move my columns around just like I would in a sheet once we're done setting up our report and then adding our report criteria. The criteria is where I can tell Smartsheet, instead of showing every single row from my sheet, which is what we're working with right now, let's go ahead and only show items that should already be done. So the end date should be in the past. And then remember, we don't want to just look at items that should be done. We want to look at the items that should be done but are not. And in our sheet, we can define this in a few different ways. So I can define it by looking at my percent complete column and saying if it's not 100%, then it's not complete. Or I can use my status drop down here. And we're going to tell Smartsheet if the status is not one of, and we just want to make sure if it is not canceled, and if it's not complete, that means it's a task that should be done but is not. So we've now defined our 2 criteria, as well as told Smartsheet which columns we'd like to see and which sheets we'd like to include. And once I click OK, it'll refresh and show me all of the rows that match our criteria. So now we've created this overdue tasks report, and we can start thinking about that next layer, which is instead of just having this filtered view, let's talk about creating a view that combines data from multiple sheets in a single place and look at how to organize and really understand the information that we're looking at. In order to do that, let's talk about working in multiple sheets. So we are going to go right back to the folders that we started in. And as I mentioned earlier, anytime that I want to kick off a new project using this template, I'm just going to right click and select Save as New. And to get us a bit of a head start with building our reports, I have done that a couple times already. So I've created a project A and a project B folder. Each of these have their own project sheet, own project dashboard, and some reports to go along and support those items. We can come back to our overdue tasks report, and reports can be changed anytime. So if I want to go from having a single sheet and actually change the sheets that my report is pointed at, I can do that. And you can point your report at specific sheets, which is what we're doing here, or you can even select an entire workspace. And this makes your report really dynamic because any sheets you add to that workspace will automatically be included. Today I am going to be specific, so I'm actually going to select our project plan B as well as our project plan A. And we already have our columns and our criteria defined. So you'll see here I'm working in an overdue items report, and this report is bringing in together from multiple project sheets. This is where I can start thinking about those next two items. So instead of just a list of items that need to be completed, I can head into our group section and tell Smartsheet, organize the results of my report, and I'd like to group them by a particular column. And you'll see the columns that I have included from my underlying sheet are my grouping options. And a great way to group would be, for example, by the status of your tasks, who they're assigned to, maybe by project phase if that was something we were tracking in each row. And for our report, I'm going to group by the assigned to person to really understand the amount of work that each person has assigned, but that's overdue. You'll notice that you can group by additional columns. So if I wanted to go multiple layers in, for example, I could say all of the tasks that are on hold, so group by status, and then within that, group by the person they're assigned to. Today we're going to keep it simple, so I'm just going to group by assigned to. Our report has now done that, so I can see all of the rows assigned to Henry, June, and Kirk, as well as anything that is not assigned, and I can collapse and expand to really focus and organize this information. Lastly, we can start adding in our summaries to really understand what we're looking at. So our report here, we have just a few tasks for June and Kirk, but you'll notice we have a pretty long list for Henry. So it's going to be more helpful for me to understand how many tasks we have for each person, and I can do that by selecting Summarize and adding which column I would like to apply my functions to. Here I'm going to stick with our Assigned To column, and Smartsheet is saying I can count how many are assigned to each person. And that's because we're working with a contact or text value, so it's not a number that we can average or sum or apply additional functions to. I'm also going to add a different summary to see the rest of those options. So let's look at the % complete for each task, and we have the rest of our functions available. So I can tell Smartsheet, for example, what is the most complete task, the least complete task, average, sum, or count, and I'll go ahead in this case and average for each group. Smartsheet has already incorporated those 2 columns worth of summaries, as well as soon as I add that summary in, we now have a total row, so I can understand that in my entire report, we have 15 and they are averaging 87% complete. Now, so far we've learned how to use a report to combine data from multiple sheets into a single view. We can also, in addition to that, customize the results of our report. So not just bringing the rows together, but adding criteria to create a focused report and choosing which columns from our underlying sheets we'd like to see. And this really allows us to focus on a report that has a specific purpose. So for example, understanding what's overdue and making sure those items are completed, and including just the columns that are relevant for that report's purpose. We've also now included the newest capabilities for reporting, which is allowing us to group the results of our report by any of the columns. So by status, by our assigned to column, or the other columns that are in our sheet, and applying functions to summarize what we're looking at. And this is really great because we can add functions for any of the columns that are in the report, and we don't have to write a formula. So Smartsheet already has these pre-built functions that'll summarize exactly what's in the report. And one additional capability with reports is really the fact that they're real-time and they're bi-directional. So what that means is reports are not just a great way to have a view of the work that you're doing, they're also a great way to collaborate and update information in these underlying sheets. For example, you'll notice at the bottom of our report here that I have tasks that are showing as assigned to blank, and they're both in our Project Plan A sheet. Now, if I notice these tasks are unassigned and they're in my overdue tasks report, well, of course, I want to get them assigned to make sure that they're getting completed. I could click on the link and head back into my Project Plan A, but I really don't need to. Because reports are bi-directional, any changes that I make in my report, as soon as I save, will be reflected back in that underlying sheet. Because of the real-time nature of reports and because we have criteria telling Smartsheet exactly what we want to see in the report, I can also count on only viewing the rows that match my criteria. So for example, if I was to complete one of my rows that show up in my overdue tasks report, and then we can go ahead and refresh, you'll notice that that row is no longer part of my report because complete is not one of my criteria. I only want to see rows that are currently in progress, on hold, or not started, but should be completed. The bi-directional capabilities that come with reports are really powerful because they allow you to work efficiently. So today we looked at how to combine two sheets into a single report, but of course you can include multiple sheets, and that means you can update multiple sheets in a single location instead of clicking from sheet to sheet. Because of this power, of course, we want to make sure you understand how this works. And the most important thing to understand about reports is that reports respect source sheet permissions. And this is a short way of saying that you need to have permissions in the sheet. So you need to be shared to the sheet as a viewer, an editor, an admin, or an owner. So have some type of access to it in order to see data from a sheet in a report. So this means in the report that we created today, which combined Project A and Project B, if I was to share that report with someone who only had access to Project A, they didn't have access to the Project B sheet, well, they would look at the same report we just looked at, but only see the rows from Project A. Similarly, if they had viewer access to one sheet, but editor access to the other sheet, in the report, those permissions would be respected. So they would see the data from both sheets, but only be able to edit data from the sheet that they have editor access to. Each report does have sharing permissions that mimic what you've seen in sheets before. So my report, I can share as a viewer or an editor or an admin, but the sheet permissions are really going to be key. So even if I share this report with editor can share permissions with my collaborators, I need to make sure they can still edit that underlying sheet in order for them to make those edits in the report as well. With those editor capabilities, reports are bi-directional. So that means that the data is the same no matter whether you're making updates and saving in a report or making updates and saving in the sheet. It just becomes whatever is a more convenient place for you to make updates and save, and it'll be reflected in both sources. Lastly, if you want to share a report, but you don't want to or can't share the underlying sheets, there are different ways to share a report with viewer permissions in order to do that. Those methods are going to center around the concept of publishing, which is publishing your report for access to someone who doesn't have access to the underlying items or the report itself. To publish a report, and this also applies to sheets and dashboards, head on over to the right side and select the Publish button and toggle this on. So publishing effectively makes your report or your other Smartsheet item available at a public URL. So if I visit this URL, for example, or if I share it with anyone, it's actually going to make my report available for viewing, and publishing is going to use my own permission. So I can share this URL and the user looking at my published report doesn't need to have access to those underlying sheets. It is, of course, view only, so they won't be able to make any edits to the report or to those underlying sheets as well. In addition to publishing our report to an external URL, I can also include a report in a dashboard, and it's still a published report, meaning it's view only, but including it in a dashboard makes it easy to find. It allows you to include multiple reports as well as other items in a single location, and it still is view only and doesn't require the viewer in the dashboard to have permissions to those underlying source sheets. The template set that we're working with did come with a project-specific dashboard in each of the project folders, as well as an overall portfolio roll-up dashboard that gives us a high-level status of all of the work that we're managing in our PMO. Here you can see that we've also embedded reports. So we have a report of active projects, including a Gantt chart, directly in the dashboard for the PMO. Here in the project dashboard, you're also able to see that we've included actually a couple reports. So using the report widget here, we've embedded a report of our overdue tasks, as well as a report of the project milestones. So a couple of those different reports that came with our template set can be easily added into a dashboard, heading over to the edit section and using our report widget. And this just allows you to select which report you'd like to include. Now there's one more element of reports that I want to talk about, and this takes us back to something we saw earlier on in our demonstration. And that is the idea that there's actually two different types of reports. So far, we've focused on a row report, and that means that you want to look at the content of your sheet, so the actual rows and the columns, and bring that into a report and apply all the concepts that we've talked about so far. In each of your project sheets, though, you will find there's also a sheet summary located over on the right side of your sheet. Sheet summary is a dedicated space where you can track high-level information about the work that you're managing in this sheet. So this can be a great place to include links to other relevant sheets or dashboards, as you see here. High-level data like the overall project name and project dates. You can bring in information from this sheet itself, and you can also use this to incorporate formulas. And you'll see in our sheet summaries here, we have formulas to track how many rows are in each of our statuses. So you can add exactly the information you need to really understand, really taking that high level view and understand what's happening in your individual sheet. Now, we of course are running multiple projects, and this is where our sheet summary reports come in, because a sheet summary report is a report, so it has a lot of those concepts we just talked about, but instead of looking at all of the rows in our sheet, it actually only brings in the sheet summary data from multiple sheets into one place. Heading back into our template set, we can go through the steps to create a sheet summary report so you can see this in action as well. So we'll start by selecting a new report, and we'll select sheet summary. I'm just going to title this sheet summary report to keep it straightforward. And then we're going to tell Smartsheet right off the bat what our source sheets are. So again, we're going to head into the template set that we started with. I will select each of my projects. And this time I'm also going to select the original that we started with, so the template. And that way we're going to have 3 sheets included this time. When we choose our columns to display, remember we're looking at sheet summary. So we're actually selecting the sheet summary fields that we want to include in this report. And I'm going to use this as an opportunity to bring together the counts. So for each of our projects, how many of the rows in each sheet correspond to each of these statuses? Now we have all of the data that I would like, so I'm just going to take this opportunity to move some of my columns around. I typically like to get these in the right order, so in progress, complete, and then on hold and canceled, and we've got our start and end dates. Just like we did before, I can group as needed, but in this case, I don't want to group. I don't have a common project manager column. I don't have a status column that I want to group by. But I do still want to get some of those higher level metrics. So I'll take this opportunity to summarize each of my columns. We're going to sum, so I know how many total across all of my project sheets are canceled, how many total are in progress, and I can continue on with each of these columns to add exactly the function summary that I need. So now I have this great high-level view, and I can of course continue adding some of those summaries for my other columns. And this helps me understand not just for each project how many tasks fall under each status, but I also understand that, for example, there's 18 in progress tasks, there's 4 tasks that are complete, 6 that are canceled, and so on. Now, coming back to our slides, I do want to take a moment to review what we've learned today about reports with our new reporting capabilities, and then share some additional resources, as well as we have several different webinars coming up that you can register for at this time. So starting with the beginning, reports are a great way to combine data from multiple sheets into a single place. And you can use reports to bring together data just to have it all in one place, or you can add additional criteria to only show rows that meet specific criteria or only include specific columns from those underlying source sheets. You can then use these new capabilities, so to group data by a specific value. And today we looked at grouping by someone who has been assigned to a task, but of course you can do this by status. If you're tracking a team that's assigned to work, if you're tracking a particular region, if you're in sales, really any of the information that you have in your sheet can be used as a group. And then once you have those groups, or once you have the results of your report, you can summarize the information using our sum, count, min, max, and average functions. With reports, they're really powerful and allow you to work efficiently because collaboration and updates are bi-directional. So as long as you have the appropriate permissions, as long as you're an editor, you can make changes and save in the report or in the underlying sheet, and that change will be reflected in both sources. If you're not prepared to share the underlying sheets, you do have the ability to publish reports or embed them into a dashboard, and this is a view-only publish that doesn't require that a user has access to the source sheets but can still see your report. And lastly, of course, we finished up by looking at a different type of report. So most of our time today was spent focused on row reports, which bring together the actual rows in your sheet. But a sheet summary report allows you to take that sheet summary data in the right panel of your sheet, which is typically more high-level information about the work that you're managing, and bring that together. So the high level of each sheet brought together to get a program view or portfolio view, and really roll up that data, still using those summarizing capabilities. Now, to learn more about reports or to review some of the steps that we took today or see additional examples, you can head over to the Smartsheet Learning Center at smartsheet.com/learning. And this is where you can find learning tracks that include shorter videos, help articles, as well as upcoming webinars. We also started our demo today in the Smartsheet Solution Center, which is available when you're signed into Smartsheet by clicking the left panel and the plus button there. That's a great place to search for and download free templates that you can use for your own work with your Smartsheet license. If you or someone on your team or at your organization is looking for additional Smartsheet education, we do have some great on-demand and instructor-led training as well as certification available in Smartsheet University. I also wanted to let you know about a few upcoming webinars that I will be hosting in the next several weeks, and all of these are available for registration at smartsheet.com/webinars. So if you're new to Smartsheet, or of course, it's a new time of year, you're kicking off new projects and processes with new collaborators that might not know a lot about Smartsheet, we do offer a Smart Start onboarding on a weekly basis. And we also have 2 webinars coming up. So in a couple weeks on January 28th, we'll have a webinar that talks about taking your process, so how your team works and what those requirements are, and translating that into a Smartsheet solution. So this will be a high-level webinar where we spend some time talking about your full Smartsheet toolkit and how you can use that to really build out the work that you're going to be doing in Smartsheet. Next month, in February, we're going to take a look at one of our other newest releases, which is Work Apps. And Work Apps is a great new way that we've created to have a no-code app that you can create to combine all these different elements of your Smartsheet solution, as well as external content, into a single shareable app. And this app can also be shared depending on roles, so including a single app where users are going to see different things depending on the role that they've been assigned. This is a really great way to drive participation once you've put in the work to build your Smartsheet solution, making sure it's really easy to get others to onboard to that work and to participate. Lastly, we do have a special event coming up called the Smartsheet Can Do Community Event. And this is an event where our CEO, Mark Mader, is going to join Carlos Watson to talk about and share stories of transformation. This is also an opportunity to ask questions through the Smartsheet community for Carlos to answer during this session. This is also available for registration at smartsheet.com/webinars. Now, we have reached the end of our time today, and I've been excited to introduce our newest reporting capabilities to you, so I'm glad you were able to join. We hope to see you for one or more of those upcoming webinars that I mentioned, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.